I was about 120 pages into my latest Arthur Hale novel when I finally heard my wife's car roll into the garage. I tapped my Fitbit without even thinking and saw the time blowing back at me, 8:17 p.m. I couldn't help it, my face tightened. That made 3 late nights this week. Up until 4 months ago, Avery had never come home late once in the 7 years we'd been married. Not once. And I wasn't born yesterday, or the day before that. Still, the first few times she called to say she'd be working late, I didn't jump to conclusions. I told myself it was just work. Then one night, when she finally walked in, I noticed her lipstick was just a little smeared. That alone wouldn't mean much for most people, but for Avery, it was practically unheard of. She was borderline obsessive about how she looked. When she leaned in to kiss me hello, I caught a scent that didn't belong to me. Some other guy's aftershave, faint but unmistakable. Later that night, when we were in bed, I made a point of pulling her close, spooning her from behind, my face pressed into the side of her neck. I don't know much about colognes, but I knew damn well there was a big difference between the white shoulders I'd bought her years ago and whatever the hell I was smelling then. Truth was, I almost always caught my breath when Avery walked into a room. That night was no different. At 30, she was just as beautiful as the first time I'd seen her back in college, maybe more. And that near gasp? That was my normal reaction whenever I hadn't seen her for a few hours. What I didn't realize then was that she noticed it every time. Later, I'd understand that she took it as a compliment because it was. And apparently, part of her found it exciting that I still wanted her so badly, even knowing she'd been close to another man not long before. "Hey, sweetie," she said casually, swaying past me like everything was normal. She kissed me quickly on the lips and turned toward the stairs. "I just need to get comfortable. I'll be down in a minute." I didn't say anything as she breezed past me and headed upstairs. Not that she seemed to notice my silence anyway. What I did notice, again, was that same aftershave lingering in the air. I frowned as she climbed the stairs, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. I knew a confrontation was coming sooner or later if I wanted any chance of saving my marriage, and I was already dreading it. At that point, I still believed, maybe hoped, that Avery hadn't completely crossed the line yet with what I'd started calling the Prince of Paco Rabanne in my head. Whoever he was, I figured he was pushing things, and she was letting him get closer than she should. For 7 years, one of my quiet fears had been that my wife would eventually realize she'd married beneath her, at least when it came to looks, and decide to fix that mistake. I didn't think I was ugly. I just knew I was average. And average didn't exactly stand a chance next to someone like Avery. The snake in our Garden of Eden had a name, Lucas Brenner. Avery was an assistant vice president at an international telecommunications company. Lucas was a 40-year-old vice president who'd transferred in from the company's headquarters in the Netherlands about 6 months earlier. Blonde, solidly built, confident to the point of arrogance. For the first couple of weeks after he arrived, I heard way more about the new Dutch guy than I ever wanted to. Then suddenly, she stopped mentioning him altogether. That silence set off alarms in my head. One night at dinner, when she was casually talking about her day, I finally asked, "Hey, that new Dutch guy still working in your office?" She looked up at me, a little puzzled. "Yeah, why?" "For a while there, he was all you talked about," I said. "Now it's like he disappeared." "Well, he works in another department," she said quickly. "We don't really see each other much." Her cheeks flushed just enough for me to notice. "Huh," I muttered, shoveling food into my mouth while my mind replayed her words. I knew that she'd just lied straight to my face. Not long after that conversation, the late nights really started. From what I pieced together later, Avery had been physically attracted to Lucas from the moment she met him. He was 6'4", about 225, and carried himself like he knew exactly who he was and what he could get away with. He spoke 3 languages, had deep blue eyes, and apparently knew how to use them. She felt like he was looking straight through her every time he smiled. And if she was honest with herself, she'd felt something spark the very first time he smiled at her. The truth was, they didn't work in separate departments at all. They worked together often. Within a couple of weeks, they were going out to lunch alone. Avery still loved me, or at least she believed she did, and she told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. She didn't think about where things were heading. Lucas, on the other hand, knew exactly what he was doing. He was aware she was married, but he pushed gently, testing boundaries. In his world, affairs weren't taboo, and he assumed she'd stop him if things went too far. 2 weeks later, they were working on a project that wasn't quite finished by the end of the day. Lucas suggested they could either pick it up first thing in the morning or stay late and wrap it up that night. The way she smiled told him everything. She called me at my office and said she'd be a couple hours late. I remember thinking how strange that felt. It was the first time she'd ever stayed late in all the years she'd worked there. But since I had late nights myself sometimes, I didn't argue. I told her I'd take care of dinner. She gushed about how thoughtful I was. They started staying late at work together. At first they just chatted, then became closer emotionally, and eventually shared private moments. Avery knew she was standing right on the edge of something dangerous. But she liked the feeling of having both a husband and a boyfriend. She was so wrapped up in her own emotions that she either didn't notice or didn't care that I had started to see the signs. When I came out of college, I'd landed a solid job with decent pay at a small local telecommunications firm. I thought I was building something steady. I didn't realize how quietly everything was starting to slip away. Avery and I had earned the same degree, but our careers started out very differently. I went local, while she took a lower position with a large international company. From the beginning, we made plans together. We agreed we wouldn't have kids until we were 30. We also decided that Avery would go back to school first and earn her master's degree online, so she could move up faster at her company. Once she finished, it would be my turn to do the same. She stuck to the plan at first. 4 years later, Avery earned her master's and almost immediately landed a promotion. Her title jumped. Her salary jumped even more. Before long, she was making more money than I was and holding a higher position, too. I was proud of her, genuinely proud, and happy that what we'd planned together was actually working. Somewhere along the way, though, Avery lost sight of the together part. When it finally came time for my turn to go back to school, she changed the conversation. Instead of my MBA, she said we should use that money to buy a house. A place where we could eventually raise a family. I wasn't thrilled about my own goals being pushed aside, but I couldn't deny that owning a home made sense. She reminded me I could always go back to school in a year or two. That year or two never came. Every time I brought up my degree again, there was always something else, something expensive and urgent, that needed our money more than my education. I didn't want to seem selfish, so I kept giving in. What I didn't fully see back then was how much Avery enjoyed being the primary breadwinner, the one with the bigger title and the bigger paycheck. Over time, she stopped seeing us as equals moving forward together. In her mind, she had quietly become the stronger half of the partnership. That night, as she came down the stairs, I could see the nervous excitement written all over her. I knew she loved me, I still believed that, but she also wanted Lucas. Wanted him badly. She needed his touch, his presence, the closeness. She wanted to spend a full night wrapped up with him, to feel that intimacy without interruption. But in her mind, she couldn't cheat. Not technically. She told herself she had to ask me first. That way, it wouldn't count. She believed I loved her enough to give her what she wanted. A weekend. A hall pass. I had never said no to her before. Dinner's in the microwave, I said flatly when she stepped into the kitchen. Just heat it for about a minute. Thanks, babe, she replied lightly. I'll grab it in a bit. Can we talk? I lifted my eyes from my book. Jack Rourke was going to have to wait. One look at her told me this wasn't small talk. Whatever she wanted to say had weight to it. And sure enough, it was exactly what I'd been dreading. I want a hall pass this weekend, Ethan, she said. Hesitant, but clear. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My mind went into overdrive while my body stayed frozen on the couch. I hoped I didn't look as shocked as I felt, because inside, it felt like my stomach was trying to crawl out of my chest. I'm sorry, I said quietly. What? I need to spend the weekend with Lucas Brenner, she said. Just once. We have feelings we need to deal with. She rushed to keep talking. Just once, she repeated. I love you, Ethan. Not him. I'll come back after the weekend, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving how much I love you. That was the moment I knew our marriage was already over. Just by asking, she'd ended it. Still, I let it play out. And what if once isn't enough? I asked. What if you decide you need more than one weekend? What if you decide you need him more than me? That won't happen, she said quickly. I promise. Really? I asked. How can you promise that? You promised me something else 12 years ago. You vowed to forsake all others. And now you're breaking that promise like it's nothing. Her face flushed again, and she suddenly found the walls and the floor very interesting. I need this, Ethan, she whispered. And I know you love me enough to give it to me. No, I said calmly. You don't need this. You want it. And you're hoping I'm stupid enough to hand it to you. I shook my head. It's not happening. Then I paused. But I don't own you, I continued. If you decide to do this anyway, that's your choice. Just understand this: every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Thank you, she said, relieved. I'm glad you understand. No, I said firmly. Don't pretend you misunderstood me. I told you to do what you feel you have to do. And then I'll do what I have to do. Whatever, she replied dismissively. The next evening, when I walked through the front door, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. I noticed a small overnight bag sitting near the door. She dressed nicely for a night out, looking confident and poised. You seem pretty sure of yourself, I said as I set my keys and wallet down. She smiled at me, slow and knowing. I'm pretty sure of my loving husband. I raised an eyebrow. Go on, I said. Give me a kiss goodbye and have a great weekend. No sulking, she added. I wanted to grab her, shake her, scream at her. Instead, I just smiled, the saddest smile I'd ever worn, and shook my head. God, I loved you so much, I whispered. Then I turned and walked upstairs. She noticed I didn't kiss her goodbye, but she never caught something else. When I said I loved her, I used the past tense. Her mind was already miles down the road, racing toward Lucas. She felt giddy, like a 16-year-old headed to her first prom. They'd been planning that weekend for 2 weeks. After 3 months of lingering touches, kisses, and hands that wandered too far, they'd decided it was time to see where things would lead. Lucas didn't care that she was married. She told him we were working through some things. She met him in the hotel lobby, and they checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Brenner. Up in the room, they dropped their bags. Before they left again, he asked her to spin for him. She did, smiling. He let out a low whistle and pulled her close, kissing her deeply. And all she could think was how damn good he was at it. They had a reservation at an upscale steakhouse for 7, which meant they had to pull themselves apart and get moving. Dinner was excellent, one of those meals where everything tastes just a little better because of the company. They shared a good bottle of wine, just one, because they both wanted to stay sharp. Dessert was gelato. They leaned in close, speaking quietly, enjoying the illusion of intimacy. Their hands brushed, fingers lingered. To anyone watching, they probably looked like a married couple deeply in love. Back at home, the remains of a medium pepperoni pizza and 4 empty beer bottles sat on the snack table beside my recliner. I like to think of myself as a decent cook, but there was no chance I was making anything real that night. After a minute of thought, I decided pizza and beer felt appropriate, the kind of meal you eat when your wife is off giving her body to another man. When I finished eating, I grabbed several heavy-duty trash bags and headed upstairs to the master bedroom. For the next half hour, I tossed all of Avery's clothes into those bags without much care. Dresses, sweaters, jeans, everything. Once they were full, I hauled them downstairs and set them by the front door. Her jewelry and toiletries got a little more respect. I packed those neatly into a box and placed it beside the bags. I wasn't calm. I wasn't rational. But I felt resolved. I went back to the living room, slid a DVD into the player, and sat down to watch my favorite movie of all time, Young Frankenstein. Somehow, Samuel Roth felt like the right company that night. Meanwhile, Avery and Lucas had barely made it back to their hotel room before he pulled her close and kissed her hard. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and they stood there like that for a moment, caught up in the heat of it. Based on what she'd noticed at the office, Avery had expected Lucas to be noticeably more impressive than me, especially considering he had me beat by 6 inches and 40 pounds. But once the moment actually arrived, she found herself quietly recalibrating her expectations. She'd heard friends joke about the difference between appearances and reality, but she'd never paid much attention before. Now she couldn't help it. As things unfolded, she realized there wasn't much difference at all, certainly not enough to justify the fantasy she'd built in her head. She tried not to dwell on it. Saturday was supposed to be full activities during the day, another high-end dinner, and then another night together. She told herself Friday had just been a fluke. I spent all of Saturday completely alone. I didn't even turn on the television until the sun went down. No matter how many angles I looked at it from, I couldn't find a version of the future where I stayed married to Avery. I still loved her. That didn't vanish overnight. But I couldn't accept the disrespect, and I knew I'd never trust her again. I wasn't going to live waiting for her to announce the next hall pass. A rerun of Leave It to Beaver played on the screen, but it might as well have been static. I took another pull from my beer and stared ahead, my mind drifting back to when things were good. Truth be told, I'd never quite understood how Avery and I ended up together. We were both business majors at Arizona State, same year, and shared a few classes. I always assumed she barely knew I existed. She was beautiful and always surrounded by people. Then one day, early junior year, she dragged a chair over and sat next to me in honors accounting. She flirted openly. And when class ended, she asked me out for coffee. I said yes before she finished the sentence. From that point on, we were inseparable. We got married about 6 months after graduation. Until a few months ago, I was sure we were solid. Built to last. Then the cracks showed. And then she did the one thing I never thought she would. That night, Avery lay in bed next to a sleeping Lucas, already thinking about damage control. She wondered how much apologizing she'd need to do to get me to forgive her once the weekend was over. She replayed my words from the night she asked for the hall pass. But she told herself I loved her too much to let a single weekend destroy our marriage. She hadn't expected to think about me at all while she was with him, and that alone bothered her. Saturday itself was pleasant. Lucas had charm. Presence. He knew how to carry himself. But when they were back in the room that second night, something felt off again. The connection she'd imagined just wasn't there. He felt distant. Mechanical. She kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, but frustration crept in. I did this to Ethan for this? She thought. God, I'm an idiot. After a shower and a relaxed brunch, Lucas was all smiles as he and Mrs. Brenner checked out. Avery smiled too, polite and composed. They shared a long kiss in the parking lot, probably the most intense moment of the whole weekend. Then they went their separate ways. During the hour-long drive home, Avery rehearsed the conversation she was sure was coming. She convinced herself I'd eventually soften, despite my anger and warnings. After all, I usually did. And if things got tense, she had backup plans. Lingerie. Apologies. Distractions. She smiled to herself, thinking how easy men could be to redirect. She pulled into the garage, shut off the engine, and checked her makeup in the mirror. Satisfied, she grabbed her bag, took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and walked into the house. "Hey, I'm home," she called out as she stepped into the kitchen. She waited for my voice. It didn't come. I could hear the big screen TV on in the family room, so she followed the sound and walked in. I could tell right away she was irritated, probably seeing my silence as childish. I was sitting in my recliner, watching a baseball game like nothing in the world was wrong. I glanced away from the screen for half a second and gave a small nod in her general direction. No greeting. No words. Not even a grunt. That didn't sit well with her. So that's how you're going to play this, she snapped. Fine. She stormed out of the room. A moment later, I heard her voice again, loud this time. What the hell are all these bags doing by the front door? I didn't answer. A few seconds later, I heard a sharp gasp, then the sound of more bags being opened. God damn it, Ethan, this isn't funny, she shouted. What do you think you're doing? Making it easier for you to move out when I serve you divorce papers, I said. She jumped when she realized I was standing just behind her. I hadn't made a sound walking up. There's not going to be a divorce, she said quickly. We talked about this. It was one weekend. One weekend. We didn't talk, I replied. You talked. I listened. You told me what you were going to do. When it was my turn to speak, I told you I wouldn't accept it. She shook her head. We've been married 12 years. You can't give me one weekend? No, I said flatly. Marriage means no hall passes. Ever. You don't get to decide otherwise. Her voice started to crack. You'd really divorce me over one weekend? After everything we've had and everything we could still have? There is no future after this, I said. I told you that. What part of I'll do what I have to do didn't you understand? Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't step forward to comfort her. You cheated on me, I said. Telling me beforehand doesn't magically make it not cheating. Especially after I told you not to do it. You didn't tell me not to, she shot back. You said I could make my own choices. And face the consequences, I said. Funny how you only remember the parts that suit you. She paced around for a few seconds, breathing hard, staring at her life stuffed into black trash bags. I'm not moving out, she finally said. This is my house too. Fine, I said. Then take your already packed stuff and move into the guest room. I'm staying in the master. She scowled. Fine. She grabbed the bags and started dragging them upstairs. You going to help? She snapped. I already did, I said. I packed. I went back into the family room and sat down, eyes on the game. I could hear her stomping upstairs, muttering under her breath. Eventually, she came back down and dropped onto the couch. She grabbed the Sunday paper from the end table and started flipping through it loudly, crinkling pages, shifting around, making sure I noticed. Aren't you going to ask me how my weekend went? She said sharply. Why would I? I asked. I assumed you slept with him multiple times. Isn't that usually the point when someone cheats on their spouse? Well, we did more than that, she said defensively. We went out. We did things. We ate at some really nice places. Great, I said. I'm thrilled for you. Maybe one of your friends will be interested. Your husband, for now, is not. She didn't look nearly as satisfied as I'd expected. The fact that she kept steering the conversation toward activities instead of intimacy told me more than she realized. Sounds like the big weekend wasn't such a triumph, I thought. Not my problem. On Monday, I spent most of the day separating bank accounts and getting our finances in order for what was clearly coming. I couldn't get an appointment with the family law attorney I wanted for another week, which meant I'd be living under the same roof with Avery for a while. She spent her Monday avoiding Lucas entirely. She knew the two of them weren't on the same page anymore. Whatever they'd had shifted, and not in a good way. More than anything, she needed me to forgive her so she could use our marriage as a shield against future advances from him. Her life had suddenly become complicated. She debated sitting me down for another talk or just pretending nothing had happened and hoping I'd cool off. In the end, she chose the easier route, avoidance. She didn't want to hear the word cheater again. At some point, though, she had to admit something to herself. cheating woman fit better than loving wife. She wondered briefly if she'd see things differently if the weekend had lived up to her expectations instead of falling flat. That evening, I didn't say a word when I got home. I didn't speak during dinner either. I muttered a quiet thanks when I finished eating and carried my plate to the sink. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said softly as I headed toward the family room. "I really am. After all these years, I thought you loved me enough to give me a weekend." I stopped and turned. "I would have thought after all these years that you loved me enough not to ask for permission to cheat," I said. "How selfish and delusional can you be?" The next day, things got worse for her. 5 minutes after she got to her office, one of her closest friends walked in and shut the door, something that didn't happen casually. "Please tell me you didn't spend the weekend with the Dutch Thor," Nora Whitfield whispered, even with the door closed. Avery's eyes went wide. "He's been bragging," she croaked, her face twisting with shame and anger. "I'm guessing if it didn't come from you, it came from him," Nora said to Avery. "But I didn't hear it directly from Lucas. I overheard a couple of the girls whispering about it in the break room while I was getting coffee." Nora paused before delivering the part that really mattered. "If people are already talking at 8 in the morning, it'll be everywhere by noon. There's no hiding it now." Avery dropped her head into her hands. Nora watched as tears splashed onto the surface of her desk. "Congratulations," Nora said bluntly. "You're officially the cheating woman every woman loves to hate and every guy suddenly thinks he has a shot with." Then she raised an eyebrow. "So, how good was it?" Avery looked up, miserable. "That's the worst part. It wasn't. I blew up my marriage for what?" She shook her head. "Lucas looks great on paper, big, handsome, confident, but in reality? Total disappointment. He's barely any bigger than Ethan and not even close to him otherwise. And somehow, he thinks he's God's gift." Nora's shock faded into something closer to concern. "So how much groveling is it going to take to get back into your husband's good graces?" she asked, dead serious. "I wish it were that simple," Avery said quietly. "He keeps talking about divorce. 7 years together, and he's just gone nuclear. No thinking it over. No counseling. Nothing." She sniffed. "I thought he'd be annoyed. He's furious. I've never seen him like this. And it's not like I didn't warn him." Nora didn't let that slide. "A warning means nothing if he didn't agree. You're a smart woman, Avery. You can't honestly say you didn't know this was a possible outcome." 2 weeks later, I said almost the exact same thing to Avery myself over the phone after she called me sobbing. She'd been served divorce papers at her office. "You told me I could be with him," she cried. "You told me I could." "No," I said calmly. "I told you it was your choice and that there would be consequences. I never gave you permission to do anything. You made it all about what you wanted. Apparently, what I wanted never mattered." A couple of weeks after that, my in-laws called me. They were upset. They wanted me to talk to Avery. To reconsider. To reconcile. I'd always liked them, especially her father, Robert. I tried to be gentle. "She said she made a mistake, and you won't even talk to her," Robert accused. "You're better than that, Ethan." "Is that what she called it?" I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "Well, she never really told us what the mistake was," he admitted. "But after 7 years, don't you owe her at least a conversation?" "She didn't tell you the whole story, Robert," I said. "I don't consider giving herself a hall pass to spend a weekend with a coworker a mistake. I warned her there would be consequences." There was a long pause on the line. No, she couldn't have been that stupid," he finally said. I didn't respond. There was nothing to add. "I'm truly sorry," Robert said quietly. "I don't know what else to say. I won't bother you again." The next day, Avery called me. I groaned when I saw her name on my phone. "More excuses," I muttered to myself. "I'm sorry about my dad calling," she said softly. I guess you figured out I wasn't exactly honest with my parents. That's not something you volunteer if you don't have to. She hesitated. I never thought he'd call. And I never thought you'd tell on me. I didn't tell on you, I said flatly. I told the truth. Yeah, she sighed. Avery and her lawyer tried to slow the divorce down, but there was nothing to slow. No kids. Irreconcilable differences. It was finalized in 9 months. She never understood why I wouldn't give her a second chance after what she kept calling a mistake. That wasn't just about being with another man, I told her one evening when she tried again. You were emotionally involved long before that. You ignored my feelings. You disrespected me in the worst possible way. When did you stop loving me? She asked through tears. There was a time when I would have pulled her into my arms at that question. Instead, I accused her of trying to cry her way back into my heart. I know you still love me, she insisted. Why won't you try to reconcile? I do still love you, I said. That's why this hurts. But you don't love me the same way. I would never have even considered cheating on you. I shook my head. And I could never trust that you wouldn't do it again the next time another man caught your attention. There won't be another man, she promised quickly. There never should have been a first, I said. She went quiet. Yeah, she whispered. While the divorce was pending, Lucas asked her out several times. So did other men from her office. Being exposed as the woman who cheated turned her into office gossip. It also earned her a meeting with human resources. We don't prohibit employees from dating, the HR director told her, but we do expect discretion. When half the men are talking about your weekend with Lucas Brenner and half the women are wondering who's next, that's a problem. She paused, then added, if this continues, you may be asked to relocate. I hear Maine is lovely this time of year. A day later, Lucas was back again, asking Avery out. Come on, baby, he said. Your husband's divorcing you anyway. We don't even need to leave town this time. That was the last straw. Can't you take a hint? She snapped. I destroyed my marriage for intimacy that wasn't even worth it. I was an idiot. Now leave me alone. 2 weeks later, Avery accepted a relocation to North Carolina. By the time she left, everyone at the company knew the truth. Lucas Brenner wasn't nearly the stud he thought he was. About a month later, Lucas transferred back to the Amsterdam office, and that chapter finally closed for good. By then, my Saturdays had settled into a quiet routine, same grocery store, same time every week. I'd move slowly through the aisles, probably looking half lost, grabbing whatever made sense for a man cooking for one. That's when Margaret first noticed me, though I didn't know her name yet. At the time, I didn't notice her at all. That was normal for me back then. I wasn't really seeing anyone. Margaret Doyle, Margaret to the people close to her, was a 5th grade teacher at a nearby elementary school. I learned later that she thought of herself as painfully average. Average face. Average body. Nothing, in her mind, that would catch the attention of a decent-looking, obviously single guy wandering the frozen food section. She was 29, about to turn 30, and convinced she was running out of time. From her perspective, I looked like I was mid-30s and somehow still unattached. What she couldn't figure out was why. I didn't carry myself like a player. If anything, I probably looked distracted, maybe a little broken. I wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but she figured out I was single before she ever checked my hand. Apparently, my shopping cart gave me away: Pop-Tarts, frozen pizza, mac and cheese, beer, and some meat for the grill. According to Margaret, nothing screamed single, maybe even divorced, louder than that combination. She'd been described more than once as mousy. Short, wavy light brown hair. Big brown eyes. Fair skin that barely saw the sun. 5'5", average build, decent legs, and by her own assessment an unusually nice backside. Personality-wise, she considered herself a wallflower. In college, her friends had labeled her the perfect wingwoman. Friendly. Loyal. Non-threatening. She didn't date much then, and she hadn't dated much since. She told me later she'd first noticed me months earlier, just in passing. For reasons she couldn't explain, she kept noticing me. About 2 months before we spoke, she started paying attention. And then, completely out of character for her, she decided to do something about it. A couple of weeks later, she found me in the store and walked straight up to me. "I know this might sound a little forward," she said, steadying herself, "but I'm Margaret Doyle. Would you like to get a cup of coffee with me?" I actually took a step back and really looked at her. No, she wasn't stunning like Avery. Not many women were. But there was something about her, something in her eyes, that made me pause. Curiosity, maybe. Openness. Whatever it was, it made me want to know more. It was the first time in 2 years I'd even considered a woman as more than just a friendly face. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how easily it came out. "I think that would be great." Margaret turned out to be an open book. Easy to read. She told me she hadn't dated much in her 29 years, and never seriously. She was smart, thoughtful, clearly well-read. I listened as she laid out her life without drama or self-pity. When she finished talking, she went quiet and waited for me. She watched my face carefully. I could tell. And somewhere along the way, she figured it out that I was divorced. I didn't have to say it right away. My eyes probably gave me away. Pain like that leaves marks. I sat there trying to decide how much of myself to hand over to this near stranger. In the end, I told her almost everything. When I finished, neither of us spoke for a moment. I let out a long breath and realized I felt lighter, like I'd set something heavy down. "I'm sorry for dumping all that on you," I said. "You're the first person I've ever told the whole story to." She smiled softly. "I've been told I have that effect on people. I'm also good with little kids and dogs." I laughed before I could stop myself. I felt comfortable with her, strangely comfortable. Familiar, even. It reminded me of how things once felt with Avery, back before everything went wrong. Before we parted that night, we made plans for the following Friday. By the third date, our connection deepened. Margaret initially wanted to take things slowly, but we spent some private time together afterwards. I remember thinking, almost to myself, that this was the first time since my divorce that it actually felt like making love, not just intimacy for the sake of being close. I made sure I kissed her the whole time. She murmured something as she lay tangled up with me afterward, her voice soft and half gone with sleep. I smiled and told her there was no rush, we had plenty of time to talk later. Then I asked her, half joking and half serious, what she was doing for the next few decades of her life. The woman who had stood on the sidelines as a bridesmaid 4 different times finally found herself front and center a year later. We got married, and life moved forward the way it's supposed to when two people actually mean their promises. We had our first child, a son, 2 years after the wedding. 2 years after that, we welcomed a daughter. Margaret never treated her vows like words said once and forgotten. She lived them every day. I'd never know it, but Avery learned that lesson too, just far too late. Years after she moved to North Carolina, she remarried. This time, she stayed faithful for 15 years, right up until the moment she caught her second husband cheating. That was when it finally clicked for her. She understood, at last, the kind of pain she'd put me through. And this time, she didn't hesitate. She ended that marriage quickly. Avery had always taken care of herself. She still went to the gym regularly, still watched her health. As she neared 50, she remained attractive, but she was single, alone, and facing a future she never imagined. She never thought her life would turn out that way. Not even in her worst-case scenarios. Her second husband had been 10 years older, had no kids, and never wanted any. By the time she realized how much that mattered, it was too late. Sure, she knew there were plenty of men in their 30s who wouldn't mind helping her have a baby, but none of them wanted to stay. None of them wanted a family. Just a role, then an exit. She laughed to herself one day, a sharp sound that was more bark than humor. I had wanted 2 kids. She had wanted 3. By now, if things had gone differently, all 3 would have been teenagers. We would have been sitting through school concerts, sports games, PTA meetings, planning graduations, talking about colleges, eventually, weddings, grandkids. All of that vanished for a short, mediocre adventure. She shook her head, again, thinking how foolish and entitled she'd been. If she were flexible enough, she would have kicked herself for it. She'd done that mental exercise 1,000 times already. A few months later, halfway across the country, Margaret and I sat side by side on hard bleachers in our local high school gym. Our 15-year-old son, Caleb, slouched next to us, pretending he didn't care. Down on the floor, our 18-year-old daughter, Lillian, walked across the stage to accept her diploma. Margaret squeezed my arm. I looked at her, and we didn't need words. Our eyes were full. I leaned over and gave her a quick kiss on the lips. Caleb groaned instantly. "Come on, you two." "Not here. Not now." Margaret and I smiled at him, then at each other. We raised our eyebrows in sync. And that's where today's story comes to a close. Was it what you expected, or did it take a turn you didn't see coming? I'd really like to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. If this story kept you listening, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to do it. I bring you fresh, engaging stories every day. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and make sure you don't miss the next one.